So today I want to talk about Governor Ron DeSantis signing Florida House Bill 233 into law. For those who may not be aware of this particular law that just got passed, it does three things in the state of Florida. First, it forces state college and universities to create surveys that will be handed out to students and staff in order to ask the extent to which competing ideas and perspectives are presented in the universities, in order to ensure, quote, intellectual freedom and viewpoint diversity. Second, it prevents students, faculty, and staff from being shielded from language they deem, quote, uncomfortable, unwelcome, disagreeable, or offensive. Third, it allows students to record professors without their permission for personal use. So if you're looking at these things and saying, well, why is that so bad? I'm going to explain. The problem with this bill is that in the vague language of it, it makes it such that these three things, which can sound sort of reasonable, actually disguise very fascist ideals. When we look at the first point, far from being a protection of all topics of conversation, it's actually an attempt by the state to impose speech upon universities. If we explore Governor DeSantis' view on the matter, we learn that at a news conference on Tuesday, DeSantis said his government could intervene if it finds universities to be, quote, hotbeds for stale ideology, end quote, without specifying what that ideology might be and suggesting funding cuts could ensue. Quote, that's not worth tax dollars and not something we're going to be supporting moving forward, end quote, the governor said. The law does not ensure that surveys will be taken anonymously, raising concerns that faculty members could also face retaliation if they express progressive views or share that they would not welcome certain viewpoints. For example, discriminatory or abusive comments directed at a student in their classroom. So, when we look at this, we also have to take into account that Governor DeSantis has very much been opposed to the implementation of critical race theory. We find here in an article from the Miami Herald that Governor Ron DeSantis is sowing division in Florida's education system as he targets the concept of critical race theory in the classroom and on campaign trail, an effort that educators and Democrats, many of them black, view as a political attempt to whitewash and suppress discussions about race. So what we're getting here is that Ron DeSantis is not in favor of all viewpoints being put out there, only certain viewpoints. Given this, we must assume that Ron DeSantis and the Republicans' goal is to intimidate universities and schools to offer conservative viewpoints on topics with the threat of loss of funding if they do not comply. This means that the state government is effectively enforcing and forcing universities to espouse viewpoints that are not protecting speech, but enforcing state viewpoints upon academic institutions. There is little more fascist than imposing state-sanctioned beliefs upon academic institutions and universities, especially those that go against the views that challenge the current status quo in favor of those that support it. Any institution that is forced to espouse a state viewpoint is in fact being compelled to do something. As an example, let's imagine that a professor is speaking on the issue of climate change. And this professor is now being forced by this law to both sides the issue in order to expound all viewpoints. The consensus of most scientists in the country is that climate change is actually a factor that is involving and affecting our environment. But in this case, the professor may have to, for the protection of their job, espouse a view that has neither scientific nor consensus, nor one that they personally believe in order to essentially both sides the issue. This is compelled speech that protects the state and capital interests at the cost of academic integrity. Which brings us to our second point. Which speech is being protected that may be considered, quote, uncomfortable, unwelcome, disagreeable, or offensive? Does this ensure that certain groups can express offensive language, such as transphobic, ableist, racist, or sexist language, which will make many students uncomfortable and create a hostile environment? Does it make it punishable for certain professors to curtail such language in the classroom? If one person in the classroom says something sexist or ableist or racist to another fellow classmate, is that something the professor can stop and enforce? And the vagueness of the bill doesn't specify this. But if we couple this with a lot of the other points that DeSantis has made and his history, I think it's quite clear that he's trying to protect speech that is already considered offensive and bigoted. Unfortunately, this type of speech can actually be quite harmful and make environments extremely hostile for students, or staff, or professors. For those who are part of oppressed groups in society, they can experience a lot of detriment to the benefit of those who already have privilege. In an academic setting, the goal of educators is to make the powerful uncomfortable, not to make it so that those who are already on the in oppressed groups are actually made more uncomfortable. And DeSantis here seems to be upholding these power structures through a state institution to ensure that only those with privilege already can maintain comfort in the classroom. Now, the last part of this, the part about recording a professor's speech, may be one that actually seems quite reasonable to most people. A student being able to record a professor's lecture could actually benefit them greatly, because one might be able to listen to lectures when they can't make it to class, or re-listen to a lecture that they already were part of in order to allow them to further process what the professor had said and taught in the classroom. But we have an issue here. While there are all of those potential benefits, we also have to examine this in the context of the rest of the bill and new law. Recording a professor's lecture could potentially provide evidence that could be used against them to target a professor via what the state has deemed a biased perspective. It can put the jobs of professors in jeopardy because the state deems them to have not given all perspectives on an issue, and in this case, all perspectives truly does mean the conservative ones that uphold the status quo. Now, as the American Association of University Professors states, if Florida legislators really want to provide stronger protection for viewpoint diversity, they should consider increasing funding for higher education so that a larger proportion of the faculty might be offered the prospect of tenure, which protects a faculty member's right to free expression. As it is with nearly 3/4 of all U.S. faculty on short-term contingent contracts, often subject to arbitrary non-renewal, those with controversial views, be they liberal or conservative, may find themselves increasingly vulnerable to political or ideological pressure, including legislation like this. So even the American Association of University Professors recognizes what this is: a piece of legislation that is providing ideological pressure from the state. And given all of this, we can see that the vagueness of the language in this bill is actually a disguise for fascist state programs to uphold the status quo and enforce speech upon academics rather than protect all valid viewpoints. It is designed to protect the interests of those with financial power and privilege at the cost of everyone else, and it denies the ability of academia to speak the truth. In a more ridiculous example that I think demonstrates all of this quite well, if we look up and see a blue sky during the day, we should not be compelled by the state to say that the sky is yellow, nor be forced to compromise and say that the sky is green as a combination of yellow and blue. The goal of academia, whether it's always perfect in this regard or not, and in more times it has issues, right? There are issues with academia that could be critiqued. The goal really is, though, to foster growth and conversation of ideas based on a multitude of worldviews and explore how our world is, and to foster new ideas and the discussion of new perspectives. It should attempt to make classrooms a safe place for all individuals, especially those in oppressed classes in society. And it should not be compelled by the state to speak the language of those with power and to speak false truths in order to appease the state and for professors to protect their jobs. So with that said, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button and bell for notifications. You can follow me on Twitter and check out my Discord in the description down below. We do have wonderful conversations about all sorts of topics like this one all the time, and you're more than welcome to join those conversations. That said, my name is Anarchist Terra, and I thank you for watching.